Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 325 of the All Dolphins podcast on this Monday, August 5th, 2024. As you can see, for those listening on the audio version, you can't see. So I'm going to tell you, I am very happy to be joined today by one of my regular guests, co-host, friends, Dave Hyde from the South Florida Sun Sentinel. How are you, Dave Hyde?
I'm well after another day at Dolphin camp, so we'll get into it. But all is good.
I have quite the list of topics to discuss. And it's long, but we are going to have to start with a history lesson because it's very topical in two ways. This is episode 325. And if you do a Dolphins podcast and you do episode 325 and you don't mention Don Shula's 325th career victory, which made him the all-time winningest head coach in NFL history, you're not really doing a Dolphins podcast. Am I right, Dave Hyde?
I'm with you. I'm with you. I was there that day in Philadelphia, so yes, 325 resonates with me.
It was, to be quite frank, a butt ugly game at rainy Veterans Stadium in Philadelphia. That's how old it was. November 14th, 1993. The quarterback who wound up finishing the game for the Dolphins was none other than the current Jacksonville Jaguars quarterback, that being Doug Peterson, who had to come into the game because Scott Mitchell, who was only starting because Dan Marino had torn his Achilles a month earlier, sustained a shoulder injury. And I think the Dolphins were trailing 14-13 at the half, got two field goals in the second half, wound up winning 19-14. Again, a very ugly win, but a beautiful day for the Dolphins for history. Don Shula eventually moving his career total to 347. That looked like it was looking dicey in terms of staying as the highest total in NFL history with Bill Belichick, except he's not coaching in NFL this year. And will he coach again?
Yeah, I think he'll coach again. I thought the perfect match from this year was the Jets get a little sidetrack from Shula, which I want to get back to. I thought Belichick and the Jets would have been a perfect match. Both short term need to win, but I digress. Let's go back to Shula. That day in Philadelphia, two things I remember. One, just sort of almost a career poetry for him that, as you mentioned, the quarterback situation, because some of his defining moments were when he had to go with the backup quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
When Unitas went down and Earl Morrall led him to the Super Bowl. Then when Bob Griese goes down, Earl Morrall leads him to the perfect season. So there are a couple other instances, the whole David Woodley slash Don Strock saga. Woodstock. I remember that being sort of a here on 325, and then you're seeing what his team can do without a great quarterback. And the other thing was, I remember standing there and a couple offensive linemen. I think it was Keith Sims and
Jeff Dellenbach, I think, was the other one, right?
But they went to reach for a Gatorade bucket to dump. This was it still is, but this was sort of the advent of the Gatorade, or right within a couple years earlier, the whole Parcells thing with the Giants. So that was the thing they celebrated. Mike Westhoff said, no, this is bigger than that. And so they went and they put him on his shoulders and they carried him off the field, or onto the field in celebration. So
Yeah.
It was an interesting day though.
No, and we can have all sorts of debate as far as where the Shula rank in terms of greatest coaches of all time. I don't know that automatically because he has the most wins that puts him at number one. There are two things I would say that I would put in his column if I were to make the argument for him. Is number one, 2 losing seasons in 26 years with the Dolphins. That's pretty impressive. And then number 2 is the fact that he went to the Super Bowl like 5 times with the Dolphins and with completely drastically different styles.
There you go. Yeah.
Running game and defense in the 70s, and then in 82 as well, and then 84 with Marino as bombs away with the aerial attack. That's really impressive because Bill Belichick may have won 7 Super Bowls or 6 Super Bowls, sorry, but it was basically always the same formula, and always because he had, I don't want to say just because, but partly because he had Tom Brady as his quarterback.
Yeah, lesser known fact, him and Belichick's careers were parallel in many ways, in that both rose up as defensive coordinators. The little known about Shula, he was defensive coordinator of the Lions back when they had Alex Karras and some big names on defense, and their rival was Vince Lombardi's Packers. And you talk to people of that era now, there's fewer and fewer left. But the rivalry between Shula and Lombardi began right then with those teams and Shula's defense, great defense. And from there, he was actually in the Miami High Life for an NFL meeting, and the guys went to the highlight, and he get his phone call, or he has to call the Dolphins owner, and from there he gets the job and all that stuff. But anyways, I always thought it was interesting that little known nugget that he was a sort of the Belichick of his time on defense in the NFL too.
Yeah. Let's just say the dude could coach. The other teensy-weensy bit of history lesson we have to take care of today, because it involves current news and it involves defensive tackle Tim Bowens, who the Dolphins announced Monday morning would be the newest inductee into what is now called the Ring of Honor. It used to be the Dolphin Honor Roll. They have scrapped that name. It's the first time since 2014 the Dolphins are doing this. They went away from the practice, and Tim Bowens, first-round pick, next to last first-round pick of Don Shula's. The last one was not quite as successful. But if you talk to, as we were talking about in the stands in Miami Gardens today, if you talk to Jason Taylor and Zach Thomas about their accolades and all they were able to accomplish on the field, both of them would give a nod to Tim Bowens for making their jobs a lot easier, because he was occupying offensive linemen all over the place.
Yeah, Tim Bowens, Zach Thomas was there, gave him a big hug. And whenever you talk to Zach, he always mentions Tim Bowens.
Always.
Because you think of, I think of John Offerdahl. John Offerdahl was in a 3-4 defense where he took on 280-pound, 300-pound guards play after play after play. By year 5 and 6, his smaller framed body wore down. Zach had Tim Bowens and several other players on taking on those players for him in the 4-3 defense, allowed his athleticism and his great play to shine for a longer career. And so when people say, "Oh, systems don't matter," systems matter in football. They really do, depending on the player.
Yeah, and I remember the draft pick. This was 1994, at a time when there weren't 73,000 draft analysts. And Tim Bowens was a run-stuffing big guy from University of Mississippi who didn't get a lot of sacks. And I remember, I think a lot of us were when the Dolphins announced Tim Bowens, 20th overall pick, we're like, I'm sorry, who? And when he showed up to camp, I think in like his first media session, it's like, ooh, that dude's big. And then you saw him playing. It's very, very no nonsense. I made the comment, you look at the definition of country strong, that's Tim Bowens. May never have lifted a weight in his life, but that dude was strong.
I remember the story came out when we're trying to figure out who is Tim Bowens after that draft. Because like you said, that's always a run for who is this guy. One of the stories that came out when Joe Green was the Dolphins defensive tackle or defensive line coach, he went and worked out Bowens, and Bowens ran his sprints in black construction boots, basically. And the Dolphins love that old school. We got this old school player. He's not going to be fancy or anything like that. So, and that's how he was across his career. I was a little surprised on hearing he was getting in the Ring of Honor, or Hall of Honor, whatever we call it.
Ring of Honor is now.
Ring of Honor, sorry. I should know by now. But the more I thought of it, look, he had a nice long career. My question then becomes Sam Madison and Patrick Surtain.
Yep.
And Cam Wake moving on from that era. I would have thought those would be the next. Now, with Madison and Surtain, they were recently coaches here. Does that, and they left, and I don't know where that stands. And Cam Wake, he should be in there. It's odd they went 10 years. I didn't realize that till you mentioned it. Good little nugget there that between Ring of Honor inductions.
Yeah, it was weird. And now, logically, you would think that they're going to start doing it again on a regular basis. I hope it's just not one this year, and all of a sudden it's going to be another 10 years. And then this is where you get I'm sure there are other names I'm going to forget, but you mentioned Sam Addison, Patrick Surtain, certainly Cam Wake. Even Cam looks to me as a guy who does not want the fanfare and any of the hoopla and like that, and maybe that's why nothing has happened with him. For example, to me, it always screamed logical for Cam Wake to sign a one-day contract to retire with the Dolphins. That hasn't happened. But again, I don't know that Cam Wake is necessarily the type of guy who wants that. So that was the news on off the field before practice on Monday. Then the Dolphins practice, and the theme of practice was going deep. Dolphins were taking some shots. Tyreek Hill was back at practice, and man, was he back at practice. Very first play with Skylar Thompson getting the first look at quarterback, 11 on 11. It's a deep pass over the middle to Tyreek, and he was getting open the entire day. There were 3 shots deep to him. The Dolphins put out the one highlight, the long completion. And this is where I'm going to clarify, because apparently it didn't come across the way I wanted on Twitter. I made the point that on Twitter he was covered by Storm Duck, and I made the point that it was good coverage by Storm Duck, who happens to be a rookie free agent, and props to the dude for staying with Tyreek Hill down the field like that as closely as he did. What it took was a great pass by Tua and a nice pass by Tyreek to make the completion. And, of course, some smart asses out there suggesting that, oh, I made it a point to say he was a rookie free agent, therefore it's the only way Tua could complete the pass. And this is what I have to deal with on a regular basis. No, I was making the point because it was impressive that a rookie free agent was able to stay with Tyreek. And then later on, Jason Mater, I apologize, Jason, if I'm butchering your name, but that dude, I mean, he is impressing the hell out of me. Also deep against Tyreek, and he stayed totally with him. That one was an incompletion. Then there was a third one to Tyreek deep. Ethan Bonner was in coverage. That one was very much underthrown, hit Bonner in the back, and this is the old cornerback never turns around, because if he had, he might have had a pick. So, but Tyreek was all over the place, had a bunch of catches, and he's still really, really difficult to cover.
Surprise. Yeah, I got to admit, I think Eric Ezukama had a couple deep passes.
No, he didn't practice. Anthony Schwartz.
Anthony Schwartz. I'm sorry. My numbers, my mind went to numbers, and you're right. Ezukama's not even practicing. So anyways, Anthony Schwartz was open a couple times deep too. And I have, we don't talk to the quarterback or the play callers after practice. I'm just curious why there was such emphasis on the deep ball in practice today. And I noticed the same thing. And I mean, I'm interested in the defensive backfield, so it was kind of interesting. On the other hand, here's Tyreek Hill and others running open deep. So not necessarily the best defensive play. And at the same time, quarterbacks were getting sacked fairly regularly. If we would have had the sack in play, that several times. I'm looking at the arms going up from Danny Crossman or whoever signaling that okay, would have been a sack. So I a lot of times I don't know what they're working. I don't know what the purpose of specific things are, because and I think this was one of them to me. I didn't understand but they got a lot of work on the deep ball. They did.
That they did. And Anthony Schwartz did not have a great day catching the ball. He had one near the side.
He dropped one, and one he stepped out on. But
correct.
He was wide open twice, which okay.
But that's the book on him.
Good with the bad.
The book on him when he came from Cleveland was basically really, really fast, but his game is not flushed out. And there's a reason the guy's basically never been able to grab hold of a roster spot, and I would be surprised if you wanted to make him the 53-man roster. You mentioned the pass rush. If we're mentioning the pass rush, we have to talk about Quenton Bell, who wore the orange jersey. We've been talking about this dude. This is a guy who's started his collegiate career as a wide receiver at Prairie View A&M. Per suggestion from a coach, switched to the defensive end position, bounced around the NFL. List of transactions reads like, I don't know, a scroll, a very, very long scroll. But he has flashed like nobody's business. And then the Dolphins released their unofficial first depth chart of 2024 on Monday. Why? Because it's preseason week, and we'll talk about the depth chart a little bit more in detail. But Quenton Bell was one of the guys listed as first team outside linebacker opposite Chop Robinson. Sorry, opposite Emmanuel Agba. Of course, understanding that Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb are not on the active roster. But Quenton Bell, I mean, man, does that guy look impressive.
Yeah, I agree. And that's what you look for. Who in the first couple of weeks catches your eye? And he has, to me, Ethan Bonner has. Maybe I'm looking at him a little closer because I'm wondering what's going to go on here. What's going to happen here? They need help at cornerback in my mind. So, anyways, Ethan Bonner or Quenton Bell has popped in that a lot of people notice him, right? And this is a reward for his 2 weeks of work. I don't know what it means a month from now. Okay, that's the question. The other thing is Chop Robinson's the name that you got to look at, right? And you see the speed. You also see if any offensive lineman gets on him, he's done. I don't see him breaking away from what an offensive lineman locks him up. And so again, we're early in camp. He's learning what the program game is about. I'm not making any conclusions here. I'm just saying, okay, Quenton Bell does look better right now. Now, at the same time, this serves as a message too, that a message of reward to Quenton Bell, saying, "Hey, good job," and a message to Chop Robinson, others, saying, "You got to pick your game up." And I remember sitting in a Dolphins general manager's office at this time of year, and he was talking about a guard, and he said, "We got to get this guy playing harder. We've got to get him playing harder." And these are the type of things to get people playing harder. And I'm not saying Quenton Bell doesn't deserve it. I'm saying maybe they feel some of the, like Chop Robinson needs to be told, you need to step it up to another level. I don't know, but I'm just saying that they use depth charts for stuff like that at this time of year.
I agree, except here's a very important caveat I'm going to throw out there as I pop up our logo here in the corner right over your head. There you go. Here's a caveat. First of all, let's begin with coaches hate depth charts.
Yeah.
Publicly. I mean, they have their own depth chart in house. They hate to have to put out a depth chart. It's by rule. They have to do it the week whenever there's a game. So that's number one. Number two, and I think you can back me on this, generally speaking, it's very rare for coaches to immediately put rookies at the top at their position.
Sure, absolutely.
It's your basic earn your way there, Rook. So which is why not surprising that Chop's not first team. Patrick Paul wasn't going to be first team. But it's extraordinarily rare, again, for a rookie to be right at the top. Usually the rookies are at the back of their position group. In fact, the only one who's behind Chop Robinson at that outside linebacker spot is Mohamed Kamara, who is a fellow rookie draft pick. Jalen Wright's at the back of the line at his running back spot. Malik Washington is fifth in his group of wide receivers, even behind Braylon Sanders. In fact, I have it right here. Behind Willie Snead, the fourth. And I'm going to tell you he's got a much better shot at making the roster than either of those guys. So that's the thing about the depth chart. Having said that, there are certain things to me that caught my eye as I wrote on the Miami Dolphins on SI at si.com/NFL/Dolphins. One of which is Durham Smythe. I've said this from the beginning because of the addition of Jonnu Smith, and a lot of fans and some media members are like, hey, finally we got a receiving tight end. That's going to be your guy right there. Sure, he's going to be a guy in the passing game, but Durham Smythe's still going to be a big factor, and Durham Smythe's still going to be your starter.
This is a surprise to me. If you're going to say, okay, rank something that surprised you about Dolphin camp, I don't see the tight end being used much differently this year than last year. And I thought, if I'm the Dolphins, if I'm sitting there in the Dolphins, what do we got to do? Okay, we got to beat Buffalo. How can we beat Buffalo?
Stop Josh Allen.
Well, okay, that's number one. I get that. Okay, but you look at, they haven't scored a lot of points against Buffalo, and the lack of production. I looked it up today. The lack of, because I was thinking about writing on Johnny Smith. Lack of production of the tight ends is considering, the defense is paying attention, what they're paying attention to is for the Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Okay. the tight end should be a soft spot to go to. It should be, and the lack of no touchdowns at all last year, so certainly none against Buffalo. But I don't think they've had more in the last 2 years, more than 40 yards receiving by tight ends against Buffalo. And those are, most of them are just, slot passes or something. So I expected to come into this training camp, they can say, sign Jonnu Smith, a above average tight end from the standpoint he's never played with a quarterback. The best quarterback he's played with is Ryan Tannehill. Okay, you look at in Baltimore, it was Cam Newton on the downswing. Last year in Atlanta,
was it?
I'm
the kid from Cincinnati.
Because I see pain in your face.
University of Cincinnati. I'm trying to remember his name.
I can't remember.
Like a second or third round pick.
Yeah, I was going through them, and there's like, okay, this will be the best quarterback he's played with, and the best offense. So I thought, and maybe they just aren't showing it in training camp. But I would have thought you'd have to work. I thought we'd see a little difference in how the tight end has been. You see him step out a couple times today from the line, but I'm waiting to see. Okay, they got to have some wrinkles for him to use in this passing game.
Yeah, no, I think they could have some quick hitters to the tight end, like our tight end screen. They could do that with Jonnu. The only exception to the Buffalo rule in terms of the offense not producing was that Saturday night game. And that, if you recall that game, there was like a 68-yard run by Raheem Mostert. There was like a 67-yard touchdown pass to Jalen Waddle. They also had like about a 25-yard touchdown pass to Tyreek Hill. And again, these are all plays taking advantage of the speed. So to me, I get the idea of what the tight end could bring additionally to what the offense already has, but I have a hard time seeing the focus of the offense being anything but taking advantage of that crazy speed, whether it be at wide receiver or at running back.
Yeah, to me, it's the change up from that, or it's if they're going to take this, leave this wide open, we're going to take 10 yards to the tight end. So I'm waiting for that to come into play. Everybody knows what plan A with the Dolphins. This, as I've phrased, this is a plan B. Odell Beckham fits into plan B, assuming he gets out there. Jonnu Smith is plan B. We'll see where that fits into things. The mystery to me, Alan, is they haven't used a tight end in this offense at all.
Correct.
That's the mystery. In the last 2 years, he coached George Kittle in San Francisco. Mike McDaniel did. He knows tight ends, and look, again, the strength of this offense, but that doesn't mean there can be off ramps or little pockets as teams try to take away those guys that you can feed. And I thought, this would be a good thing for the Dolphins offense.
No, without question. And that's one missing element. And another missing element is be able to, I know it's a bad comment. It wasn't that bad a comment, was it? Okay, sorry.
That's my dog. He doesn't like closed doors.
I got that part. So, yeah, to me, it's the ability to throw the tight end and then the ability to run the ball when the other team is expecting you to run. Now, the Dolphins did have success. I think it was maybe in a New England game where they kind of shoot up the clock at the end of a win. I think it was a game where that ended with a touchdown pass, a no-look touchdown pass to Jalen Waddle on the fourth down or the misdirection touchdown pass. But that drive used up a lot of running plays at a time when the Patriots knew they were going to run. But for the most part, Dolphins are not good enough at doing that, and this is where they need to get better. But the identity is always going to be the speed, and I think the Dolphins solidified that, if there was any doubt.
Sure.
Over the weekend by completing the securing the big three with the revised contract for Tyreek Hill, which, by the way, put up their cap space number now at $35 million for 2024, which is quite a ways from where we started. But for those who think, like, okay, well, cap hell, what cap hell? Well, the Dolphins did lose a lot of players that they may otherwise have kept had they had the cap space to do it. So it wasn't like, first of all, teams have to get compliant, so they're always going to get it done, and they're always going to keep their best players. There will always come a time, though, if you operate like this, where the sacrifices will have to be made. For example, next year they're already, what was the number, for some 40 million over the cap, the projected cap of 260 million, up from this year's 255, with a top 51. So again, there will have to be moves that will have to be strictly cap related moves. So when we talk about cap held, no, it doesn't mean Dolphins won't be able to field the team or they won't have good players. It means that certain players will have to be sacrificed for the cap space. That's what that means. But the bottom line, though, it was a good move in securing the services of Tyreek because, again, he's part of this formula that they have, and he's a big part of this formula that they have.
Well, he's the lead domino. But he was secured. This was to make him happy, right? I mean, this was he was secured for the next few years. This was to say, okay, yeah, we know everybody's getting paid. We're going to pay you too because you deserve it. And so, a happy team is a winning team is the philosophy of Mike McDaniel and this team. And it's interesting that the theme that's coming out of this camp. And now you're out there every day. I'm out there every 2 or 3 days. Theme is, and they've said it openly too, has said it. This is our team, not Mike's team.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've ever heard an NFL team talk like that. I know the days of Bill Belichick are done. There aren't tough guys, coaches across the league. Dan Campbell might be the last one, and even he's a player's coach in that he's a tough guy that you'd love to play for because not a tough guy trying to put it in your face. Not like when Jason Taylor came into Bill Parcells and Parcells' first comment was, "You got anything left?" And those days are gone. And so I get it. I'm just a little surprised. I'm saying this is our team. It's not Mike's team. It's
certainly not a comment you would have heard from Tua a couple of years ago. That is for sure. No, and the comment, maybe one of the most eye-opening comments of training camp was assistant head coach or associate head coach, one of the two, and tight ends coach John Embry, when he was asked about load management for players and during training camp, and he goes, "You mean preschool?" It was like, and
there are conflicting ideas even within the Dolphins on what's going on out here, which is interesting to me. That the resting, it's not load management, it's resting, right? I mean, that's basically load management is a nice technical term, and they do have GPS. They have measurements, who's taken too many steps, whose speed is monitored, et cetera, et cetera. But I made calls to a few writers, national writers, over the weekend and talked to them. And as near as I can tell, nobody's doing it quite like the Dolphins, where there's on a rotational basis, handful of players every day are given time off. In other camps, a guy gets a day off or there's sit-ins, as we know, but nothing's going on like in the Dolphins.
And we won't know until December, January, whether that was the right approach or whether, and by the way, for those who think that the Dolphins did that last year, they were like managing players in terms of keeping players up before they could return to save them for December, whatever. I don't buy that for a second. To me, the notion was not putting a player back in before he was ready and putting him at an unnecessarily elevated risk of injury. That's not the same thing as saving somebody for the end of the season. And again, we'll see toward the end of the season. Before we wrap up, I know you spoke with Zach Seeler. You wrote a column. I believe it's already up on southrosentinel.com. I encourage everyone to read it because that dude can write. Without giving everything away, any things stand out from your discussion with the dude and what you wrote about?
Well, to me, one of the things I love today writing and talking to people about is the journey. And we know Zach Seeler's journey is pretty remarkable. I never really talked to him about it. I never, from a walk-on and a Division II. He only went to Ferris State because he got an academic scholarship, you know,
Oh,
to
I didn't know that part.
working 70 hours at a Chrysler plant in the summer to pay for college. He used his signing bonus, $70,000, seventh round pick. He got $70,000 with Baltimore to pay off his student loans. Um, so when you, and the great thing about him, he's unspoiled. You know, he appreciates
Yep.
where he loves the job because he knows that he was going to go work in auto plants as an engineer out of college. He had job offers, and here he gets picked. And the other options, like a lot of us had forks in the road. His fork was he wanted to go to the NFL, and he got that chance. But he's still that guy, that walk on, that the guy who had to pay. He lived in an RV when he first came to the Dolphins because he didn't have any money too. And now he signed a nice contract. It's pretty remarkable his production. You know, he had 10 sacks, 22 quarterback hits last year. Christian Wilkins had 9 sacks, 23 quarterback hits. They were dominant, and they played all the time. Christian Wilkins played the #1 snaps for an interior defensive lineman, and Seer played the 4th most. So you're getting your money's worth out of them. So, you know, that defensive line isn't the same. Zach Sealer's gone from the sort of the 4th name on it a year ago to starting this year, assuming Jalen Phillips doesn't make some fully miraculous comeback and be ready at the start. Sealer's the #1 guy on that defensive line right now.
And you mentioned the number of snaps that they played. Check out, again, the website, si.com/NFL/Dolphins. I wrote a story today about an idea the Dolphins had. They wanted to bring in another defensive tackle via trade last year. A, to lighten the load on Seer and Wilkins, and B, maybe looking ahead, knowing that Wilkins probably was going to be tough to re-sign. It didn't pan out, but I have the details on the website. Another thing about Seer, Baltimore Ravens don't make a whole lot of mistakes as an organization. I mean, they are near the top in terms of quality. That's one guy they let get away. From talking to people in Baltimore who cover the team, they did like Seer at the time, tried to stash him on the practice squad or waived him. I don't recall what it. They just simply had too many.
No, they waived him. They waived him in December,
right, okay.
and he came down here on a Friday. He signed with the Dolphins on a Friday. This, of course, was during the Brian Flores Gong Show. You know, he came in Friday, he played Sunday. You know,
pretty much,
yeah. You know, the Dolphins liked enough of him in the last couple of weeks of that season to sign him, and that was one of Chris Greer's really good moves that they got him.
Absolutely. And then the last thing about Seer, because I did some research after this season, I probably should have done it before, but I didn't anyway. And my thought was like, yeah, 10 sacks. Good luck repeating that, and especially now with Christian Wilkins not going to be there. And then I looked up his stats, had 19 sacks 1 year at Ferris State.
He
so
did,
it's
yeah.
Not like the dude can't rush the passer.
Yeah, it was interesting talking to him. He was 17 when he went to college. He was 6'6", 215 pounds in his second year, and he broke his finger, and it turned out to be the greatest thing that could happen to him because he couldn't play, and he wasn't playing. He's a red shirt, you know. He's a walk-on, and the defensive line coach he went to Piper High here in Broward, told him hit the weight room. And Zach Seer went to the weight room. He went from 215 to 265 in a year, and made his Ferris State career. He did have 19 sacks one season, and as he said, you know, we started rotating him out, thinking we'll rotate defensive linemen. No, he's out there and he is sort of with the Dolphins. He wants to play every play, and he's great. Leave him out there. So.
No, absolutely.
There's your Zach Seer here. I love journeys like that. You know, we all do that. You appreciate coming from nothing, rags to riches story almost.
Oh, we love those. And Quenton Bell's one of those. And I would expect you to write about him at some point. We'll write about him on the Dolphins on SI as well. A couple of bookkeeping items. The attendance report for today. Still no Eric Ezukama. Still no Jordan Poyer. The main guy. Still no Savan Ahmed. Couple of the guys had, as we mentioned before, load management days, including Jalen Ramsey for the first time all training camp. Jalen Waddle also didn't work. Teron Armstead didn't do any team stuff. And then tomorrow is the first of the 2 joint practices with the Atlanta Falcons. Jonnu Smith going up against his former team. Said basically was looking forward to whooping whoever's across from him. Didn't spend a whole lot of time in Atlanta. And those will tell us actually probably more than the preseason game will, because in the preseason game, we don't know who's going to play. And if they play, it's not going to be for very long. And I might almost suggest at times the intensity in a joint practice is higher than it is in the preseason game. So
it is now. It's become that. And in fact, the intensity has been so much. Like last year against Philadelphia, I heard Philadelphia officials were worried about players getting hurt, and they called off the second day, and they said, well, there's a flu bug going around. But and you see that now teams are scheduling 2 days, and it's only one, because the intensity is so much. It's more than the team officials really want to stomach sometimes. And so they get their 1 day of hard work in, and rather than come back and do it in the second day, they okay, let's stop.
Yeah, it's interesting because per the CBA, teams are allowed 4 joint practices, and the Dolphins are not doing 2 and 2 like teams usually do. They're doing 2, 1 and 1 with Washington and Tampa Bay following this week. So we will obviously recap everything that we see as much as we can. I'm going to work in conjunction with a fellow writer to make sure we have everything covered, because it's impossible to watch both the Dolphin offense and the Dolphin defense. On that note, please like, subscribe, share everything that you do to a podcast. Dave Hyde, thank you very much for joining me once again.
Alan.
And we will catch you guys later. Thanks for watching.